Now let's discuss about the chapter 7. Chapter 7 is all about transfer taxation. Now, what is transfer? Transfer refers to any transmission of property from one person another. A person may be natural person such as individuals or juridical persons created by law such as corporation, partnership, or joint ventures. Type of transfers is bilateral transfer, unilateral transfer, complex transfer. Bilateral transfer involve transmission of property for consideration. They are referred to as one rose transaction or exchange. Example is sale and barter. Next is rationale of transfer, taxation, um, tax evasion, tax circumvention theory, benefit receive theory, state partnership theory, wealth redistribution theory, ability to pay theory. Tax evasion or minimization theory, exchange may be intentionally priced to evade or minimize income taxes. The tax circumvention theory, even without a deliberate intent to evade income tax transfers, have a natural effect of decreasing natural income tax collection of the government. Next is the benefit received theory. When a person transfers priority by donation or succession, the government is a party in the orderly transfer of the property of the donee or heir. This is made possible by government laws which enforce or effectuate donation and succession. Complex transfer. The rule of complex transfer are transfer for less than full and adequate consideration. The rule of tax rules on transfer for adequate consideration, transfer for adequate consideration are them pure exchange and are subject to income tax, not to transfer tax. What is constitutes on adequate consideration? There is no fixed quantitative rule on what constitution on adequate consideration. The determination of whether or not a consideration is adequate requires considerations of the facts and the circumstance surrounding the scale. Transfer for less than adequate the full consideration. Transfer for less than full and adequate consideration are split into its components. Transfer element and exchange element. The transfer elements is subject to transfer tax while the realized gain on the exchange element is subject income tax. Next is the state partnership theory. The state insurance a civil and orderly society, the commercial undertaking and wealth accumulation flourish. Wealth redistribution theory. Equitable distribution of wealth is widely accepted as an element of social progress and stability. Ability to pay theory. No one could gratuitously give what he could not afford. The nature of transfer taxes. Privilege tax, ad valorem tax, proportional tax, national tax, direct tax, and fiscal tax. Classification of transfer taxpayer and their extent of taxation is resident or citizens, non-residents aliens, Status of transfer is transfer occur in the location of the property. That's all. Okay. Chapter 12, the concept of succession and estate tax. Succession is a mode of acquisition by virtue of which the property rights and obligation to the extent to the of the value of the inheritance of a person are transmitted through his death on another or other heir by his will or by operation of law. Article 774 Civil Code. Types of succession is a testamentary succession, intestate succession, and mixed succession. Will. A will is an act whereby a person is permitted with the formalities prescribed by law to control to a certain degree the disposition of this estate to take effect after his death. Article 784 LBID. Types of will: holographic will, notarial will, and codex. Nature of succession. Succession is a gratuitous transmission of property from a deceased person in favor of his successors. Elements of succession: descendant, estate, and heirs. Who are the heirs? The law identified certain persons which it designated as compulsory heirs. Types of compulsory heirs: primary heirs, secondary heirs, and concurring heirs. Summary of rules: concurring heirs and descendants and ascendants, descendants and ascendants, relatives, and Republic of the Philippines. Other person in succession: legatee, divisi, executors, administrators. Estate taxation. Estate taxation pertains to the taxation of the gratuitous transfer of properties of the decedent to the heirs upon the decedent's death. Nature of estate tax is excise tax, revenue or general tax, ad valorem tax, national tax, and progressive tax. Clarification of decedents for taxation purpose. One is decedent of citizenized decedents, non-resident alien residents. The Chapter 16, Introduction to Donation and Donors. Donation is the gratuitous transfer of property from one person to another. Donation inter vivos versus donation amortis causa. As the causa. As previously discussed, donation inter vivos is one made by living donor. A donation mortis causa is one made by deceased donor. Next is essential requisites of donation. Capacity of the donor. 2 is intention to donate. 3 is donative act or delivery. 4 is acceptance by the donee. Formal quasi-type of donation. For a donation of properties to be valid, it must have to adhere to certain formalities required by law. A, real properties. B is personal property. Next is type of donors: resident or citizen, non-resident or alien. Reciprocity rules for non-resident aliens. Types of donees: relatives and strangers. Relatives is brother, sister, whereby the wall or half-blood, first accessory, and lineal descendants. Relatives by consanguinity in the collateral line within the fourth degree of consanguinity. B is strangers, in a person other than relatives. Taxation, donation to relatives and the strangers. Donation made to relatives subject to a progressive tax. A donation to strangers subject to a 30% corporation tax. Rationale behind donors taxation to control tax evasion of estate tax. 2 is to control tax evasion on income tax. The donation tax. The estate tax model. Gross estate pertains to the totality of the properties owned by descendant at the point of his death. Deduction generally pertain to reduction in the inheritance of heirs, such as expense of the death, obligation of the descendant, and losses of property since and descendants' death. But they also include exemption from extensively discussion in chapter in the state tax under the law. The net taxable estate is the net properties of the descendant after all pertinent deduction allowed by law. And that's all.